All right, today we're solving a classic gardening problem. How to harvest your kales so that just one plant can keep feeding you all season long. Let's dive right in. I'll never forget my first time trying to harvest kale. I was maybe 10 years old, standing in my grandma's garden, and I was staring at this giant leafy monster of a plant. So I did what seemed logical. I grabbed the whole thing with both hands, gave it one huge yank, and pulled it right out of the ground, roots and all. And without even looking up from her weeding, that's all my grandma said. And yep, I had just made the single biggest mistake that new gardeners make with kale. And that right there is the mistake. Treating kale like it's a head of lettuce, a one-and-done kind of vegetable. If you chop it off at the base, your season's over right then and there, but that is not how kale is designed to grow at all. See, kale is a biennial. It's a cousin to things like broccoli and collard greens, and it's built to produce for a long, long time. If you just know the right way to harvest it, a single plant can honestly feed you for months. So what's the secret? Well, it's this beautifully simple technique called the cut and come again method. It is a total game changer, and it's the absolute key to keeping your plants lush and productive week after week. So how does this even work? Well, it is all about protecting the center bud, or what gardeners call the crown. I want you to think of this as the plant's growth engine. As long as this little leafy heart in the middle is untouched, the plant gets the signal to just keep pushing out new leaves. You're basically working with the plant, not against it. Okay, that all sounds great, but the big question is, when do you even start? How can you tell when your kale is actually ready for its first harvest? Luckily, it's pretty straightforward. You're just looking for a plant that's about 8 to 10 inches tall, and you want to see that the outermost leaves are roughly the size of your hand. This usually happens about a month, maybe 40 days, after you first put the seedlings in the ground. And the process itself? Super simple. It's really just 4 steps. In fact, let's look at a diagram to see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see the method right here in action. You're going to start from the bottom of the plant, harvesting the biggest outermost leaves first. The absolute key is to leave that central crown, that little heart, completely untouched. And a good rule of thumb is to only take about 3 to 5 leaves from each plant per harvest. That way, you don't stress it out. And here's a pro tip for you. Always use sharp pruning shears. If you just tear the leaves off by hand, you can create this ragged wound on the stem, and that's basically like putting out a welcome mat for pests and disease. A clean cut keeps the plant healthy. Okay, so harvesting correctly, that's half the battle. The other half is keeping your plants healthy and full of energy so they actually want to keep producing for you. Really, the key here is just getting into a simple rhythm of care. It's not complicated at all, but being consistent is going to reward you with an incredibly long harvest season. So let's run through this checklist. Harvesting every few days actually tells the plant to produce more leaves. A monthly feeding with something like compost tea gives it the nutrients it needs to keep going. Mulch is great for keeping the soil moist. And if you live where it's really hot, a little shade can keep the leaves from getting tough. And of course, always be checking under those leaves for any unwanted pests.
Now, if you want to take it to the next level, you can try something called succession planting. Basically, you put in a few new seedlings every 2 or 3 weeks. This ensures that as your older plants start to slow down, you've got a fresh batch of young, tender plants ready to take their place. It's like having a non-stop kale factory in your backyard. Of course, timing is everything, and it really depends on where you live. In cooler zones, kale absolutely loves the spring and fall. In warmer zones, it's a fantastic winter crop. And get this, a little bit of frost actually makes kale taste sweeter. It converts some of the starches into sugars. Another way you can keep your kale healthy is by giving it the right neighbors. Some plants are great at repelling pests, while others can end up competing for nutrients or even attract the same problems. So this guide here really breaks it down. Good companions, like aromatic onions and garlic, can actually confuse pests that are looking for your kale. Bad companions, like tomatoes, are what we call heavy feeders. They compete for the same nutrients. And planting kale right next to other brassicas, like broccoli, just creates a bigger, more obvious target for pests like cabbage worms. But, all good things must come to an end. Even the best cared for plant has its limits. If you start seeing the leaves get kind of small and tough, or if you see a thick flower stalk shooting up from the center, that's called bolting. The plant is basically telling you it's finished making leaves and is now shifting all its energy to making seeds.
All right, you've mastered the harvest, you've mastered the care. Now for the best part, bringing those beautiful greens into the kitchen and keeping them as fresh as possible. So to keep that kale super crisp, wash it in cool water with just a little splash of vinegar. That'll get rid of any dirt or tiny pests. Then you've got to dry it thoroughly. A salad spinner is your best friend here. Then just pop it in a bag in the crisper drawer with a paper towel to soak up any extra moisture. It'll stay fresh for up to a week that way. And this is the reward for all that effort. A beautiful, heaping colander of fresh, vibrant kale that you grew yourself. It's ready for salads, smoothies, soups, you name it. And hey, if you end up with way too much, you can always turn back to Grandma's wisdom. Her freezer trick is genius. Freeze the chopped leaves flat on a baking sheet first. That way, they all freeze individually and they won't turn into a giant icy brick inside the bag. So there you have it. By ditching that one-and-done yank and really embracing the cut-and-come-again method, you can turn a single row of kale into a season-long supply of fresh greens. The only question left is, what are you going to do with all of it?